Our focus standard for this lesson comes from grade 7, Expressions and Equations, Standard 4. Use variables to represent quantities to construct and solve equations for real-world problems. Our topic is from our Simplifying Expressions and Equations unit. Write and solve equations for word problems. Our essential question is, how do we combine our skills to translate words into equations and solve equations? So please take a moment, pausing the video if you need to copy down the topic and essential question in your header, along with today's date, set your question column and your note column, and resume the video when you're ready to begin. So we're going to jump right into our first problem. I want you to read it, and then we want to talk about how are we going to translate it into an equation. So Tom was participating in a fundraiser for his math club by selling candy bars. His goal was to sell twice as many as last year, plus 50 more. He reached his goal by selling 174 candy bars. How many candy bars did Tom sell last year? So I want you to think about it for a few moments, pausing the video if you need to. And I want you to try and translate these two parts of our problem into an equation. What would that look like? And then resume the video when we're ready to discuss it. Okay, let's see if we agree. So the first part I did was to focus on this twice as many as last year. And I used the variable y for last year. You could use any variable that you wanted. And twice as many of that. Well, I had remembered from our work on translating that twice meant to multiply by 2. So I used the term 2y. And then it says plus 50 more. So I added onto my equation to write plus 50. In the next sentence, it tells us he reached his goal and by selling 174 candy bars. So I said that his goal of 2y plus 50 is equal to 174. So now we have an equation that looks a lot like the ones we had in our video from the last lesson on how to solve two-step equations. So let's see if you can think about what is going to be our first step. I always like to start by using the equal sign to divide the two sides of the expression, so I can keep remembering that idea of the balance scale, and what I do to one side, I also have to do to the other to keep it balanced. And also that analogy about unwrapping the present. So here's our variable and our term with it. So that's like the present inside of the box with the wrapping paper. So we need to undo this plus 50. That's right, we undo it by doing the opposite operation. So we're going to subtract 50 from both sides. What is our result after we subtract 50 from both sides of this equation? Well, we should end up with 2y, because we subtracted the 50 and got rid of this part. And 174, subtract 50 on the right, is going to be 124. So we have 2y is equal to 124. Now, y is being multiplied by 2. So what is the next step that we have to undo to get y by itself? What's the opposite of multiplying? That's right, we have to divide by 2, because that's the opposite of the operation that's happening right here. So go ahead and do the next step and see if you can figure out how many candy bars did Tom sell last year. That's right. If we divide both sides by 2, 2 divided by 2 is 1, so it leaves us with that 1y, and 124 divided by 2 is 62. We can of course plug 62 back into our equation and make sure that it works. And we always want to make sure that with a story problem, we write our answer in a complete sentence. So you might write a sentence like, Tom sold 62 candy bars last year. Let's take a look at the next example. Example number 2. Caleb was one of the Friday Panther Paw drawing winners, and his prize was a box of candy that had 53 pieces of candy. Caleb gave each of his friends 2 pieces of candy and now has 5 pieces remaining. How many friends did Caleb give candy to? So once again, I want you to think about this equation, and if you think about this part here in this middle section of the word problem, how would you translate that into an equation? The equation I came up with is 53 equals 2f plus 5. Because he started with a total of 53 pieces of candy, so there's my 53, and that's the total, and so I set that equal to 2 pieces of candy times all of the friends that he gave it to. That's what we're trying to figure out, so I use f for the number of friends, and plus the 5 pieces that he has remaining. So now we need to solve it. Go ahead and see if you can go through the steps to figure out how many friends Caleb gave candy to. And then pausing the video to do that, and resume the video to compare our work. Alright, let's see if we agree. So starting with the equation 53 equals 2f plus 5, since 53 is on the left and already simplified, and we're looking at this part of our equation with the variable, this expression on the right, the plus 5 is the term furthest away, not involved yet with the variable. So I started by subtracting 5 from both sides. We subtract 5 from both sides. 53 subtract 5 was 48. And when we subtract 5 on the right, we did that to get rid of this plus 5. So all that's left is the term 2f. And since f is being multiplied by 2, we have to do the opposite operation. Well, the opposite of multiplying by 2 is to divide both sides by 2. And 2 divided by 2 is just going to leave us with the variable f, and 48 divided by 2 equals 24. We can test our work and use 24 in place of f, and 24 times 2 is 48. 48 plus 5 is 53. So we find out that Caleb was very generous, and Caleb gave 2 pieces of candy to 24 friends. Here's our last problem. Cassidy collects superhero pins. She sold half of her collection and then bought 14 more. Cassidy's collection is now at 68 pins. How many pins did Cassidy start with? I'd like to see you go through this whole process. See if you can translate this sentence into an equation and solve it to figure out how many pins Cassidy's collection started with. Pause the video to do so, and resume the video to compare our work. How did you do? The equation I came up with is 1/2 p for half of the pins that she sold, and she sold half of her collection, p representing the number of pins, plus the 14 more that she bought, all equal to 68, since that's how many pins she has now. When I did all this work to solve the equation, I came up with the answer that Cassidy started her collection with 108 superhero pins. Do you agree? Let's check to see that we got there the same way. So this problem's a little bit tricky, as I mentioned. It starts off that we would subtract 14 from both sides, and that leaves us with 1/2 p is equal to 54. P is being multiplied by 1/2. What's another way to multiply by half? dividing something in 2. So instead of changing it to division, I thought about it as p being divided by 2 to get half, and the opposite of dividing by 2 would be to multiply by 2, and that way we find that 54 times 2 is 108, and so she has 108 pens that she started with. That is going to conclude our video for today. Please make sure that your notes are complete, that you've shown all your work, and you're ready to try more problems like this.